Joining us now is the Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. He's the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee. He previously served as the lead House manager for the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump. Congressman Raskin, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us again this morning. You and I were on yesterday evening together. The speech that Donald Trump gave last night, we don't invest a lot usually in Donald Trump's speeches, except he's called people Marxist, the corrupt DOJ and FBI. He accused them of interference in elections. He called people who don't like him or are prosecuting him crooked, corrupt, and criminal, referred to them as a cancer and thugs. He's moved fully into the category of what autocratic leaders have done in the past. There is no discussion. There was no valid discussion about this 44-page, 45-page indictment. There's no valid defense offered. It was just that everybody's a thug and a criminal and corrupt and against him.
Yeah, it's an excellent authoritarian tactic to divert and displace attention from what is actually contained in the indictment, which seems like an overwhelmingly powerful case that he violated the Espionage Act and engaged in obstruction of justice. So he turns instead to ad hominem attacks on the prosecutors in an attempt to denounce the whole justice system. I mean, he's somebody who's clearly willing to do very serious damage, not just to the national security of the United States, but to our democracy by undermining people's faith in the rule of law and the justice system. I mean, basically, his position, and now it's endorsed by the GOP, is Donald Trump can never be guilty of anything.
Right.
He really is beyond the law.
Yeah, it was when people say no one is above the law or beyond the law, his point is I'm not even going to bother, and I'm sure his lawyers will have to bother with the defense, but he's not even going to bother. There are some interesting things in this indictment, one of which is him having a conversation with others about how he's got documents here, they're secret, don't come too close to them. I could have declassified them when I was president, but it's too late. So it's abundantly clear from this indictment, should it be proved to be true, that he knew what was wrong. He knew what's right and wrong. He knows what he's allowed to do and not do. And in moving around the documents and plucking things out of the boxes, there is a consciousness, as lawyers say, a consciousness of guilt.
Well, that's a mirror of what happened on January 6th, where, when he's in reality mode, he's saying to the people around him, I can't believe I lost to this guy. He's making plans for leaving the White House. And he's demonstrating sufficient hold on reality that he knows exactly what he's doing. But then when he's in front of the crowds and the mob, he flips over and he says, this is the biggest heist in history. This is the biggest ripoff. This is the biggest scam. So the whole thing is really not a test about who Donald Trump is. We know exactly who he is, Ali. It's a test of who we are and what kind of fidelity we have to the rule of law and the justice system. And do we have the democratic patience to see this through and to maintain perspective about what's happening? He clearly is going to try to activate his most extreme followers to engage in, in violent and dangerous actions, the kind that we saw on January the 6th. And so people need to be prepared for that. But at the same time, we have to have this long-term view that American democracy is resilient and we're going to be able to survive Donald Trump.
One of the things that you tried very hard in the impeachment of Donald Trump was to get people to understand what happened. It's not that it was highly complicated, but, being able to see things and use video and imagery was helpful. It would help here, right? Lawrence Tribe said yesterday, everybody should read this. Jack Smith said on Friday, everybody should read this. I've recorded it so that people can download it. But I just want to read a paragraph here, paragraph 54, where he's talking, attorney number one, Trump attorney number one is telling him he's got to meet certain obligations because there's a subpoena. And he says, makes the following statements. A, I don't want anybody looking. I don't want anybody looking through my boxes. I really don't. I don't want you looking through my boxes. B, well, what happens if we just don't respond at all or don't play ball with them? C, wouldn't it be better if we just told them we don't have anything here? And D, well, look, isn't it better if there are no documents? And this is attorney number one who has provided this testimony or provided this information in interviews to the FBI. There is a real sense here, I think, if Americans read this document, that maybe they will be less hoodwinked by Donald Trump.
Well, that's right. I mean, reality is the ultimate antidote to this kind of polemical and ideological attack on our rule of law. And when you read through it, you discover something remarkable, which is even when he had committed the crime of taking hundreds of these documents, they're not charging him for that when he returned the documents originally. It's only when he kept not returning them, he kept hiding them and moving them around, that they said this is perfect demonstration of his intent to deceive the government and to unlawfully possess these documents. But he's getting away with dozens and dozens of criminal offenses because they said, all right, if he returned them at the beginning, we won't charge him for that. It's only after these repeated efforts that they're bringing criminal counts.